Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest research launch from the CCMA. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. My name is Stephen Yap. I am the Research Director at the CCMA, and this is the Voice of the Contact Center Consumer 2024. This is the fifth consecutive year that we have been able to share the latest findings in terms of consumer expectations, consumer preferences, consumer behaviors related to our world, the world of customer contact. And I cannot lie, this is probably, no, it is definitely my favorite study of all the studies that we do at the CCMA. This is, for me, my absolute favorite because it's been going now for several years. This gives us the opportunity to track how things have been going over time. And we've managed to uncover some really fascinating stories over the last 4 years. And I hope today we will be able to share with you some of the latest and equally fascinating stories coming through in 2024 in terms of how our consumers, our customers feel about what we are doing. I'm going to be joined shortly by a distinguished panel that's comprising Dave Mason from Odigo, Chris Ward from Market Study, and Stacey Mayers from Bensons for Beds. But first of all, I'm going to get going with my presentation. As always, there is a much longer report that I'm not going to have time to share all of with you, but that's going to be available shortly for download. It's a free download for both CCMA members and non-members. It's going to go live later this afternoon at ccma.org.uk. And I've only got time really to share with you sort of a high level, some of the snapshot of some of the things that we're seeing this year. But the full report is going to be available later this afternoon from ccma.org.uk. Those of you live on Zoom, I would absolutely encourage you to make use of the Q&A function. So if you've got any questions for the panel, if you've got any questions for me, pop them into the Q&A, and we will try our best to get them to those questions before the end of the hour. So here we go. Voice of the Contact Center Consumer 2024. I do hope you're fired up, got loads of energy, got a nice cup of tea or coffee next to you. I do have quite a lot of data for you, but in my experience, contact center people don't mind a bit of data, and I hope that's true because I do have a fair bit to share with you. Now, those of you who've been following this journey with us over the years might remember that one of the things we've been tracking since the very beginning is the overall perception of customer service. Is customer service getting better or getting worse? And you might remember, some of you, if you were following this journey with me last year, that last year was all about how things were turning in the wrong direction. So from 22 to 23, we saw perceptions of customer service turning more negative. So the question has always been, do you think customer service has improved compared with 12 months ago, or do you think customer service has got worse compared with 12 months ago? And we saw a downturn from 22 to 23, so that in 2023, the proportion of those people who said that customer service was getting worse was almost double the proportion of people who said that customer service was getting better. 34% thought things were getting worse, and 18% thought that things were getting better. So where are we in 2024? Well, there's been a swing back in the right direction. So perceptions have recovered, but not a huge amount, as this chart shows. So on the left, the blue bars represent the proportion of people who say that customer service has improved compared with a year ago. And in 2023, that was 18%. In 2024, it's 21%. So we've seen a 3 percentage point increase. The proportion of people who say that customer service is getting worse compared with a year ago was 34% in 2023. And this year, it's 31%. So essentially, that 3 percentage point movement has occurred to the positive in 2024. So that is mildly encouraging. We're not seeing a huge improvement, but there is an improvement, which is good news because we certainly didn't want things to continue going in the wrong direction. Now, what is the picture when it comes to specific sectors? So this is a really broad and sweeping question when we ask about customer service overall, but it becomes, I think, more interesting and more nuanced when you look at perceptions when it comes to individual sectors, as we can see on this slide here. Now, what this slide shows is the same question, but in terms of asked specifically in terms of specific sectors. So do you think customer service is getting better? And that's the percentages here represented in the blue. Do you think customer service is getting worse? And that's represented by the bars in the red. And I've stripped out the people who are in the middle and the don't knows. So only the proportion who think it's getting better and only proportion who think it's getting worse are shown on this slide. And I've done my sort of a little version of like a net promoter. So I've subtracted the getting worse from the getting better, and you can see the scores along the bottom here. You can see the net scores here. So we can see that some sectors are in the negative net territory, and one sector, being airlines, is in a net positive territory. You can see there's actually a really big spread across the different sectors in terms of how people feel, with airlines getting the most positive reviews or the most positive rating, plus 5 net, meaning 20% think that airline service has been getting better and 15% think that airline service has been getting worse. If you get all the way to the left, you see the likes of government and utilities getting the if you like, the most negative scores, the strongest negative nets. Now, what's going on here? Is it the case that the sectors that are receiving the more negative scores are objectively delivering a lower standard of customer service? Possibly. What else could be going on there? I think there's more to it than that. And this is discussed at length in the report. I won't go chapter and verse in terms of what I think is going on here, but you can read at length in the report. I think there's an awful lot going on, which I might summarize as something that I describe as the category effect. When you ask a consumer a question in a survey, like how do you feel about customer service from the government, from airlines, and so on, the answers that consumers give is very much driven by their overall relationship with the category. So the way that consumers interact with categories like their energy company or their local councils is really fundamentally quite different from their mobile provider or their airlines. And that is, again, due to a number of reasons. One of the reasons is the amount of choice that you have. So typically, you would see the sectors towards the right, which get the more positive scores, sectors where there's more choice, and sectors towards the left, where there typically is less choice. You don't typically have a lot of choice in terms of your local council or your energy company. That has an impact on how consumers feel about the category. Frequency is another factor that plays into this difference here, where typically the sectors to the right you would typically interact more frequently with, or you would certainly have more opportunities or touch points with your bank or with your retailers, typically than say your energy company, which you might only interact with once a year, or your local government, which you might interact with even less than once a year. So a question like this is really driven fundamentally by how people feel about the categories overall. So I would urge a lot of caution in taking these as gospel and saying, oh my gosh, we're doing so badly if you are working on the sectors on the left, because expectations are really different depending on the fundamental relationship between the consumer and the category. Now, this is the score, or these are the results for 2024. If we look at how the results have changed since 2023, what we can see is in all of the sectors, there's been an uplift towards the positive. And in the case of utilities, train and bus companies, public transport, airlines, and government, there's been a big uplift. So it's very rare that I get to see plus 15 percentage points uplift in anything year on year. But we see this in utilities. So while utilities are still in a net negative category, they've improved plus 15 percentage points since 2023. And why is that? Is it because utilities have been doing a much better job of serving customers? Well, I think that is true to us. I do think that is true to a certain extent, from what I understand, what the likes of electricity and gas companies have been doing better to support, for example, vulnerable customers, to help customers with high energy costs and cost of living. I do think that energy providers can take some credit for this uplift, but I think fundamentally this is driven by the consumer and the consumer expectation. And fundamentally, if we look at what's happening in the utility area, we're seeing energy prices dropping from the peak. If a year ago, we were at the absolute peak of high energy costs and the energy price shot. And that hasn't had a huge effect on how people felt about the support and the service they were getting from their energy companies. We still are in a period of high costs, but certainly not the shock that we experienced 12 months ago. So I think this is also having a bearing. People are adjusting, and as a result, that is being reflected in the survey results, and people are feeling less negative than they were about the category, about energy, than they did in 2023. But it's good news. And again, I think this suggests to me, in addition to us in the contact environment doing a better job of supporting our customers, it suggests that consumer confidence is rebounding slightly. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a huge rebound, but it's certainly there is a rebound, which I think we're seeing in these scores. Here's another question, which I think is a way to ask the question, which is more specific and relevant to what we do. So the previous question was all about how do you feel about customer service overall? Now the question is, do you feel that advisors in contact centers, in customer service departments, make an effort to help customers or not? And again, I've shown this in terms of a net score, which is the positive scores on the blue, which is, yes, they make an effort, versus the negative scores in the red, which is they do not make an effort. So once again, we see a spread. There's quite a big spread, and it's a similar pattern. You see the categories to the right, typically where there is more choice, where there is a higher frequency of interaction, and then you see the categories toward the left, where customers, consumers, residents tend to be more captive, and where perhaps there is typically less frequency of interaction. But note as well, compared to the previous scores, that we're all now in all the sectors, without exception, are now in positive territory. And in the case of retail, we're in plus 37 net positive territory. In the case of banks, we're in plus 34 positive territory. So it's really interesting to see the way you frame the question has a huge impact on the way consumers respond. If you ask about customer service as a more high-level question, what you typically get back is, how do I feel about retailers generally? How do I feel about government generally? If you ask a more specific question, like, do you think advisors in contact centers make an effort? You get a much more positive score, which I think is encouraging, and it shows that consumers can differentiate, or should I say, consumers' feelings about the brand overall, represented in the earlier ratings, are different to how they feel about the work that we are doing specifically, which is, I think, a more accurate representation in the scores here. And it's good to see that the scores here are positive, and overwhelmingly positive in the case of certain sectors. Now let's move on to talk about channel preferences. And this, again, is something that we've been tracking since the very start, since the very conception of Voice of Contact Center Consumer in 2020. And the question is, for each of these types of interactions, would you be okay to serve yourself, or would you rather be assisted by a human? So you can see here, across the different types of interactions, the split between I'm happy to serve myself in the light blue versus I would rather be assisted in the dark blue. And as we've seen in previous years, it varies depending on the journey. It varies depending on the interaction. As you might expect, the more complex interactions towards the top are the ones such as complaints and refunds, where consumers typically are more likely to want to be assisted by a human. The less complex, the more straightforward interactions where there's less to go wrong towards the bottom are the ones where consumers are typically either happiest to serve themselves, such as opening a new account or getting some advice about a product prior to placing an order. But the real point, the really interesting point I want to share is how it's moved since 2023. We started seeing this last year. You might remember if you were part of this journey with me last year. And we've seen it again from 23 to 24, which is that across most of the journeys, the willingness to self-serve has gone backwards. So the first couple of years, when we started tracking this, there was a normalization of self-serve. The proportion of people across most of the journeys who were willing to self-serve increased. We've seen it go backwards for 2 years in a row now for most of these journeys. So the exceptions are routine servicing, where there's been no change since last year, advice prior to placing an order, where there's been a plus 6-point increase in the willingness to self-serve. But across all of the other journeys in the mix, there's 9, and across 7 out of the 9 journeys, the willingness to self-serve has gone backwards. Consumers are less willing to self-serve than they were before. So what's going on there? Well, let me share with you one possible reason, or one of the possible reasons why I'm seeing consumers continuing to turn away from self-serve. So we added a question in 2024. If you have tried self-serving, have you ever failed in your self-serve journey, and therefore requiring you had to contact a human advisor to resolve your query? And of those who said yes, I have tried a self-serve journey, 70%, or 7 out of 10 consumers who tried a self-serve journey have failed to complete a self-serve journey within the last 12 months, therefore requiring assistance to resolve. I'm absolutely one of those. Perhaps you are as well. I'm sure most of us as consumers can relate to this. Self-serve, when it works, is fantastic. When it doesn't work, it can be hugely frustrating because you've made the effort, you've gone through the journey, and you've failed. You've wasted time. And what that means for us as professionals and for our teams as well, of course, is that we've created this whole category of demand. This whole group of frustrated consumers have been delivered to the front lines, into the contact centers, already annoyed because they tried and they failed. And that has a lot of implications for our people on the front line in terms of dealing with the frustration, but also helping consumers to help themselves, and if you like, providing technical support to consumers to how to stay on the happy path. But I think this is, for me, very clear evidence as to why consumers appear to be turning away from self-serve on the whole, because there are a lot of broken self-serve journeys out there. And this has created a certain amount of cynicism, I believe, with consumers, and a certain amount of low, if you like, a reduction of expectation of what self-serve is capable of achieving. So I believe the mandate is really clear. We need to continue to improve. We need to make sure that our consumers stay on the happy path. And we also need to make sure that the option to switch to human assistance is always there. And that deflection away, we have to manage that deflection very, very carefully, because nothing is more frustrating than failing a self-serve journey and then not being able to contact a live contact center advisor for assistance. Could AI be the answer to upgrading our self-serve capabilities? Of course, there's been so much debate, there's been so much discussion around particularly generative AI and the potential of generative AI to upgrade consumer experiences and protect our front lines from all those frustrated, failed consumers. Well, for the first time in 2024, in the Voice of Contact Center Consumer Research, we wanted to understand at a high level some consumer views of AI in customer service. You always have to be a little bit careful about asking about highly technical, future-facing topics in consumer research, because we can't expect consumers to know about things that don't really exist yet or that they haven't personally experienced yet. So we've tried to keep things at a very, very high level. So one of the questions we asked is, do you think using AI in customer service is a good thing or a bad thing? And you can see the results here. And actually, the consumer population is pretty divided. I just realized I didn't give you any methodology to begin with, but just for the record, it's a survey of 2,000 people. It's representative across the UK. So it's a pretty representative, robust piece of survey research. And you can broadly divide the consumer population into three chunks. About 1 in 3 people think it's a good thing on the whole, AI in customer service. About 1 in 3 people think it's a bad thing on the whole. And about 1 in 3 people say it's neither good nor bad, or don't know. We then presented consumers with a list of potential AI benefits, again, within the context of customer service, and we asked them to select all the ones that they believed were true. The first thing I want to point out to you is down at the bottom. 27% couldn't pick any one. That's quite a large proportion of people, and I'm not surprised, because, as I mentioned, AI is new and not everybody is clued up on AI. In fact, most people aren't clued up on AI, so I'm not surprised that a lot of people just say, don't know, I can't select any of these. What was the most selected benefit? It was to use AI to assist human advisors in contact centers with information and suggestions. So that's quite interesting, because that was selected more often than sort of the more direct benefits like personalized recommendations and resolving queries more quickly and accurately. And that suggests that what consumers at the moment want, or their if you like, their desire, is to keep the human in the loop and to use the AI to support the human in the loop. Then we asked, which of these potential risks of using customer service and AI do you think are true? Note that the don't knows here are 16% versus 27% when it comes to the benefits. That's quite interesting by itself, because that suggests that the risks overall are more salient. People are more aware of the risks and more able to name or select risks compared with benefits. And I think, again, that makes sense to me. If you think about the wider media coverage, the broader public debate that's surrounding AI, I would say it's true that generally there's been more coverage of the risks, and perhaps the benefits are more salient to people like us who work in the industry, but not as salient to the end consumer. What are the top risks? The very top risk selected by 44% was lack of human interaction. What's interesting is that both the top benefit and the top risk relates to the human in the loop. So the top benefit was use the AI to support the human, and the top risk was the lack of human interaction. In the report, there's a lot more discussion around how, at the moment, the consumer perception of both risks and benefits surrounds the loss of human interaction, the loss of the human advisor. So I think that is a theme that will continue to very much run through everything that we do. And I think it is very much upon us to reassure consumers that our adoptions of AI, whether they're front of house or back of office, is not there to replace the human. Because today, the concern and the fear and the perception is very much that the technology is going to replace the human. So as I see it, and from what I understand of a lot of AI deployments going on right now, they are very much about supporting humans and supporting the human advisors to do a better job, to be more productive. They're not about taking away the human advisor. And that is a message I think we need to continue to be bringing to our customer base, and to be reassuring the public who do have these concerns that the robots are going to take over. There's an awful lot more there that I don't have time to share with you. I hope that's given you a little bit of a flavour of what this year's research has covered. At this point, I would like to invite our panel to the stage. Hello, and thanks to everybody dialed in for your Q&A. I can see there's questions coming in, which we will try to get to very, very shortly. So welcome our panel to discuss some of those findings with me. In no particular order, I just like to ask each of you to introduce yourself quickly. Dave, would you like to go first?
Certainly. Thanks, Stephen. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Dave Mason. I'm Director of Service and Operations here at Odigo, and we're incredibly proud to be supporting this research paper with CCMA for, I think, the 5th year running, Stephen, now. So great to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks for taking the time, Dave, and thanks to Odigo for being our partner for 5 years on the go. Stacey, hello, afternoon.
Afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invite. So I'm Stacey Mayers. I'm the Head of Customer Experience and Customer Services at Bensons for Beds. I'm really excited about sharing some thoughts and ideas on the paper that you've just done.
Welcome, Stacey. Looking forward to hearing more. Chris, good afternoon.
Hey, afternoon. I'm sorry I'm a bit gloomy looking. I was saying to the guys before, the lights are automatic and I'm too small in the corner to turn them on. But I'm Head of Customer Relations for Market Study Insurance. And I kind of like what you just said there, Stacey, and what you've been through, Stephen. You can relate to it so much as an individual consumer. Never mind what we're doing in our roles, we're all consumers. And I can just think, yeah.
So welcome to all three of you. And I should mention as well for the audience that Stacey and Chris were part of the cohort of professionals that we interviewed in contribution to the research, and they are quoted along with other professionals in the report that's getting published this afternoon. So we've been on a research journey together, if you like. And I'm just going to kick off with a question around consumer expectations. And I showed earlier that there is quite a big spread of opinions, and how people feel about, if you like, their insurer determines to a certain extent how they respond to a question like, do you think you've been getting good customer service from your insurer or from your retailer or from your bank? And that tells me that the way that consumers feel about a category overall really does influence their expectations. And so comparing scores against sectors is not necessarily always an apples to apples comparison, because the way that people feel about certain sectors may be really different to others. So I want to kick off with that. I suppose my question to all of you is, how have you seen consumer expectations in your sector or across sectors change over the last year or so, and what part of those expectations would you say sort of makes a really big difference to how you need to service those consumers? And perhaps Chris, I could direct that to you in the first instance.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things. I mean, the first thing I definitely agree with, and I'm kind of like a good place, because the insurance we got, we do for a lot of different brands. So the consumer, a lot of well names out there. And we may have customers go through exactly the same process, exactly the same journeys, everything else, but the difference in the perceived satisfaction or not can vary, and the only differentiator in there is the brand. Everything else is identical: the journey, the policy, everything else. So that really resonates home. We see really big differences, and they stick, and those differences don't move and haven't moved for a number of years. So I think that's really interesting. And I think the other thing that we've seen, I guess the other guys will probably see this as well, is kind of almost like an immediacy, but not an immediacy from an automated point of view. Is the customer wants it to be one and done, much more so than it was before. And I think that generally we see it in sort of some of the wording and some of the complaints we look at in the root cause analysis is definitely a less willingness for the customer to put effort in. Basically, I want to tell you short and sweet what I want, and you need to sort it out, and you need to own it as management, which isn't surprising and how it should be. But I think we've seen much more reticence from customers to do the legwork, really. And I think, well, I'll let see what others think.
And just before we move on, Chris, I just want to build on that, because of course in general insurance you are facing challenges with increasing premiums, which of course are for reasons outside of your control. Have you seen that affect what your customers expect or demand of you, despite the fact that it's not your fault, if you like, it's due to all those macroeconomic factors? How does that impact you and your teams on the front line?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly on sort of, if you look at the repair journey, I don't know, take motor vehicle or household, doesn't really matter which one. The whole load of commodity issues we've got at the moment, difficulty in supply chain, the price of commodities is going up, the availability to get parts and labour in place to do stuff. What we do see customers refer to much more perhaps than we used to do is, for example, the excess. Well, I've got this excess, I don't want to pay my excess, I don't feel you've resolved this quick enough now. I would have expected better. And we do explain, and we understand sort of, like you say, the macro issues that are affecting it, but ultimately, the view we're taking at the moment, looking at, well, is that really the customer's issue? Should they have to care about that? I know we can't change the world, but we need to be really sort of cognizant of, setting that expectation at the beginning about this is what your journey is going to look like, and these are the things that may or may not happen, the difficulties in there. So I think customers kind of grudge, and I think you've said it before, is sort of the grudge purchase of insurance. No one goes out, oh, whoopee-doo, I'm going to go buy my insurance today. I think it's a kind of, with the cost of living, it's something you could do without paying if you didn't have to, and therefore you expect more for what you're having to pay, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. If you think about insurance, if you think about all those categories and sectors perhaps don't get the higher ratings like government, people are not naturally predisposed to love buying insurance or to interact with a local council. If you're booking a holiday, on the other example, that on the other side of the coin, there's more opportunity to delight, because perhaps the frame of mind and the mindset of the consumer on that journey is really different. Thanks, Chris. Stacey, let's turn to you. At Bensons for Beds, you also operate a house of brands, if you like, with really diverse brands. And how have you seen sort of consumer expectations across those brands affect how Contact works within your team?
I think if I think back to COVID times, not that anybody wants to think back to that, but if you think back to COVID times, customers' expectations were slightly less. They knew that the world was in a state of flux, and it was customers were quite forgiving. I think we've come out of that now, and actually customers' expectations have risen, and certainly within our market, these are big ticket items. They're a conscious purchase. They're emotive. You spend a lot of time actually thinking about what that purchase is going to be, and then spend a lot of time in your purchase. So it has to be right. But therefore the expectation is higher, I believe. And I also think, that a lot of customers look at your Amazons. We're in a world now where you can order something online at 9 o'clock and have it delivered the next day. That's not the same with our items. You just can't do that. It's physically impossible. And we wouldn't be providing the right service if we were able to do that. So I think we have had to really focus internally on what those expectations are. I think, to Chris's point, really setting out what the expectation is from us to a customer. So it's very clear, it's very transparent. You're not going to get this tomorrow. Let's really, take time and take love in manufacturing it for you. And we'll keep you updated along the way at every single point. And that's been a really key turn point for us. It's the whole, actually, if you set the expectation very clear and very transparent at the beginning, and you clearly communicate all the way along, then you get a happy customer at the end of it. It's where that slips at some point. There is little forgiveness now.
Do customers generally expect, or do some people really think they could get a mattress or a bed delivered overnight?
Yeah, sometimes it's a needs must as well, So we have to try and deliver as quickly as we can on some products. Obviously, it was not going to happen on everything.
I think that speaks to me of how the best-in-class brands have framed expectations for all brands, and that customers are not just comparing you against your direct competitors, but they're comparing you against the best-in-class, which may or may not be a fair comparison or an apples-to-apples comparison. Dave, you operate across a lot of sectors. Are you seeing differences in terms of your customers, your clients, your partners across sectors in terms of what their customers, their end customers expect of them?
I think it kind of picks up on the point that Chris made around immediacy, and certainly the Amazon reference. You know, we as a society have a culture of I can pick up my phone, I can order something, it arrives the next day. It is a seamless journey. And I think frustrations and customer expectations really arise where a journey becomes non-seamless, right? So whether that's through self-service, whether that's through the kind of CX loop of doom where you're caught on a chat bot and you keep getting looped back and back and you never actually speak to anyone. So I think the culture and the expectation of consumers now is for everything to move and shift into this direction of it should be easy, it should be painless. You should know who I am as a consumer. The technology is there. There's sort of like these kind of muted understandings of the technology and AI, you know, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But this expectation that when I engage with a brand or with whoever that may be, you know what it is, who I am, and it should be a very seamless conversation, if you like, to resolve. When that doesn't happen, that's when you get the kickback, and that's when you get this kind of degradation of overall sentiment.
And in some sectors, it just isn't possible, as we've talked about, to deliver that instant seamless resolution, in which case, as Stacey's saying, it's about communicating and keeping people updated when you can't deliver that immediate resolution. I'm going to take a question now. We're starting to get some really great questions in. I encourage everybody dialing in live to use the Q&A panel. So a really good question for Richard. I'm going to answer that in the first instance, and perhaps I'll ask you, Stacey, to also give your take on this. So Richard asks, do you have any evidence as to whether consumer and economic sentiment has an impact on overall satisfaction expectations? When things are going well in the economy, consumers are more positive about the service they experience or not? And I think absolutely yes. I think absolutely yes. And I think I was referencing earlier the uplift in a lot of sectors from 23 to 24. And I think a lot of that, some of that may be due to because we are doing a better job. I think we should take some credit. But I think a lot of that is also due to the fact that things aren't great at the moment, but perhaps we are not at the peak of high energy costs and high cost of living that we were a year ago. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that consumers are positive, but they're perhaps less negative compared to the absolute peak of negativity that we were 12 months ago. And I do believe that has an impact on the way that people feel about providers and the way that people feel about the experience that they get from providers. I think it has a bigger impact almost than the actual quality, the objective quality of service delivery. I'd just like to also come back to you, Stacey, because you referenced sort of pre-COVID and forgiveness. Could you expand on that a little bit more in terms of sort of forgiveness, and also have you seen in your business the impact of sort of wider sort of economic sentiment?
Yeah, so I think there are still things happening in supply chain and market that, you know, we aren't in control of. So, you know, when the Red Sea impacts happened and when the Suez Canal happened, that's all out of our control. And it's about the communication to the customer, but ultimately the customer is the end user, and we're not able to deliver now. I think if we think about 2020, 2021, customers were very accepting of that and just get it to me when it can. I think now we're very much in, and perhaps due to economic climate, we're very much in a state of that kind of isn't my problem. I've paid for my goods. I need it. I want it delivered. You need to go away and sort that as a business. So, you know, we really need to be better at the communication and how that flows, and actually not just, I'm sorry, we've got this issue, I don't know when it's going to happen, I don't know when you're going to get it, but actually nailed on, this is when you're going to get it. I can assure you of that. In the interim, can we provide you with something different? Because I guess again in our sector, it's a lot of money. People haven't got that kind of money. We're not talking about oranges at a supermarket. We're talking about people's life savings and, you know, something that they've saved for a very long time. So that there is definite connection between the two, and there's definite connection now between customer forgiveness and a business and what they're able to do quickly and succinctly with the customer.
Thanks, Stacey. Chris, I wonder if you might have a view from your world of general insurance when times are hard as they have been, when money is tight as it is for many people. Do you see that having an impact on customer behavior, on customer emotion, perhaps because they really need to get that claim resolved? How has, for example, sort of high cost of living had an impact, if at all, for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when people are feeling the strain, I mean, I think you said it, Stacey. People feeling the strain. I think that sort of overflow of feeling in general sentiment kind of affects probably your mindset on a lot of things, and I think we can probably all relate to that. I think in other cases, as you say, there is a genuine need and a genuine urgency. For example, you know, people haven't got as much necessarily income that's disposable or free to hand. They kind of expect the journey to put them in a place they want to be quicker. So whether that be a mobility solution the next day, a courtesy car, or a repair or a house sorted out, customers aren't really wanting to or so interested in putting their money there and going through a claim back process or anything like that. So I do think that definitely has an impact. And I also think, although not quite the same thing, but definitely related, when we see sort of articles or news about price increases, or we see an article from, I don't know, Money Saving Expert or Martin Lewis or something like that, we then do see a knock-on effect, and you can see that demand move straight through into your contact centers, you know, almost the next day, the day after. And I think as things are then on consumers' minds, it then bleeds across into everything else again. So I couldn't necessarily prove it, but you can kind of see it anecdotally and connect it, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I'm going to take another question from Lois, because I think it's a nice build on what we've been talking about in terms of immediacy versus keeping people informed. And Lois asks, do we have any research, or what is an acceptable turnaround time when it comes to social media? So when should you respond, or how quickly should you respond to a query or a complaint or a post on your social media feed? I don't know whether any of our panel has a view.
I would say quickly, and certainly our aim. We actually did quite a piece of work on looking at this probably beginning of this year, end of last year. So our immediate aim is to kind of get hold of it almost straight away during our working hours, where we've got it on there, is to pick it up. We don't offer an overnight 24-hour on most of our social media, but as soon as we're in the business hours, we immediately take ownership of it. We reach out, we engage, we try and use the customer name, personalize it, and then we will try and take that offline until we can get into the nitty-gritty of the details and start to talk about personal circumstances, things like that. You know, we do look at that. It's one of the things we absolutely measure, and we engage with our providers for, you know, Trustpilot and surveys, Facebook, all that kind of thing about our response times. And, you know, we're in the really high 90s of, you know, same day response or quick hours. And I think definitely from experience, I have seen, you don't respond, you can get yourself into a you know, a real chain of the customer will come back and again, and then other people will jump onto it if it's kind of an open communication, and it becomes really difficult to manage. So I do think time is a difference. Even if you can't resolve it, take ownership and then explain that we need to take it offline.
Yeah. I guess it probably depends.
Sorry.
You go ahead, Stacey.
I was going to say, I would absolutely agree with that. I think there are certain channels where a customer expects a response straight away, and I think social media is definitely one of those. I think from kind of a complaints point of view, that is almost the channel where you know that they're going to multiple social media channels because they want a response there, and then they probably have tried another way. They've probably been in that loop of a chatbot, and now they just want a response. So I think from a social media point of view, it's as instantaneous as you can be. And echo Chris's point of, you would try and then pull them out of that channel to get more information, but certainly as quickly as you can.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I would add on, actually, interesting you say that. The thing that we have seen, not huge, but the thing we have, so what I've certainly seen is more customers actually not even bothering to go through the complaint process, or even to engage, or in fact, even to reach out to the business much at all. They just go straight on social media. But I want this sorting. That hasn't really, and historically, we would have seen quite a bit of interaction. There's sort of the frustration, you get stuck, I don't know where else to go. I'll go on social media. I don't know if it'll continue, but we've certainly have seen some cases fairly recently where customers just going straight on there. That's just their channel.
I've got a really interesting comment / question from Daniel, which I'd like to perhaps direct to you, Dave, in the first instance. So Daniel's question / comment is, it's fascinating to hear the same key principle come up over and over again regardless of industry. Stacey summed it up well. Set out expectations clearly at the start, and then keep you updated every step of the way. So it's consistently good advice, and yet Daniel poses the question, why isn't it consistently achieved? Why do we even agree that it's not consistently achieved? Or why are there so many frustrated customers when it seems like the answer or the principles to getting it right are clear and well understood? Dave, I know that's a very big question, but as somebody who works a lot across, you've seen a lot of providers. I'm sure you've seen good and bad providers. Is it as simple as that? Is it as simple as just get the basics right?
So yes, it is as simple as getting the basics right, but it's what are those basics? And I think the biggest challenge that I see is trying to get consumers onto the right channel for the right reason. And when a customer comes in on the wrong channel, it's how do you then persuade them to go onto the right channel? And the frustration can build. We talked a bit about social media. Our engagement with social media is very much, if I'm in a chat on social media, the chances are it's quite conversational. If I'm using email as my kind of route, well, generally I'm going to fire off an email and I would expect a response maybe the same day. And if I'm on a telephone call, that's a very immediate kind of response as well. So it totally depends on the reasons, and some engagements are more emotive than others, especially when we're talking about finances, when we're talking about insurance, when we're talking about maybe we've had a car accident or something like that. The emotional side, the human emotion, then kind of kicks in, and you want to make sure that as an organization, you're able to react to that and give the right level of engagement that makes your customers feel like you care. Ultimately, that's what we're here to do. So yeah, getting the right channel for the right reason, I think, would be the key point, and having a reflection as a business on, okay, well, we have all these channels available to us. How do we then look or almost silo various kind of engagements or customer interactions and make sure that we've got the right steps in place and process in place to ensure that customers engage in the right way?
Thank you, Dave. I want to turn to self-serve, and I'm going to take a question from Dave Walsh in the Q&A, but also sort of follow up with a question which I'll direct to you, Stacey, about self-serve and how do we get better at self-serve. So I presented some findings that showed that self-serve continues to become less normalized, or people would actually rather go back to the human advisor. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is because a lot of people are failing to complete the self-serve journeys. So Dave in the Q&A asks, is there any view on this based on demographics such as age? So the answer is it's consistent across all demographics. So whether you're talking about more mature people or younger people, that turning away from self-serve is consistent. It's more similar than it is different across different cohorts. And my question for Stacey in the first instance is, Stacey, have you seen any evidence as to why consumers might be turning away from self-serve? And as a provider, how do we bring people back?
So yes, we have. We actually were quite late to the party on self-serve and live chat, even because we wanted to make sure that at the point we landed it well, and we didn't, have this continual loop. Everybody has had that moment in time when either you start a live chat or you start a self-serve journey somewhere and you think this is going to be really quick and you're already in a queue of 3,000, and I'm thinking, what, this is live chat, I'm not sure how this happens. Or I end up, can you provide your postcode again, and you switch off as a customer, and it's a really poor journey. And then you pick up the phone and that's a really poor journey for the colleague because you're already on a back foot. So we have seen customers not want to use that as a channel. We openly hold customer focus groups to try and get around, what is it that you want from a customer services department? And the echoing sentiment of every single customer is human interaction. Don't take away human interaction. And very similar to what you showed, customers are happy asking pre-sales calls. But other than that, actually, they want to know that there is somebody there that can pick it up if it fails. So it's about, I think, for us specifically, presenting that option all the way through. So yes, you might choose this channel of choice, but just so you know, there's always the human element there if you choose that this isn't for you, or it isn't working, you aren't getting the right answer. And it's about understanding what other channels we can use for customers. So live chat isn't always the option that people want to go to. Do they want to use WhatsApp? Do they want to be on the phone? Do they want to use email? And it's about presenting that choice for a customer, and then they can tell you how they're going to interact with you.
Thanks so much. I want to take a question from Nicola and send this your way, Chris, if it's all right. Nicola asks, how do you see contact centers adapting to incorporate outbound initiatives such as proactive outreach or personalized follow-ups to enhance customer satisfaction and loyalty? So typically we focus a lot on inbound, but where does outbound have a role to play, Chris?
Yes, I absolutely think it does have a role to play. Sort of talking about some of the same things we've seen recently, and we definitely are seeing some really quite personal and really nice sentiment back from consumers. Is kind of because customers quite often are surprised, which is probably quite an awful thing to say, but actually I didn't actually think anyone would make the outbound call. Probably back to my point before about consumers feeling they have to do all the legwork with it. I absolutely think it can immediately kind of set out that I am an individual, i.e. our colleagues, having a conversation and communication with you as an individual customer. And I think it just personalizes things out. And also what you can see, journeys don't always go well, and particularly with the complaints journey. Sometimes there are difficult conversations. The outcomes aren't always what the customer wants or expects for whatever reasons. But having that conversation at the start to introduce, I am so I am going to look after your query and your concern, we see real value in that, and that continues down through the journey chain. And I'm not going to say we're super advanced at it, because we're not. It's something we're still looking at, something we're trialing, but we are definitely seeing early results in that. And even if it's just, and it doesn't have to be a telephony phone call, what we can use as well is we try and use multi-channel. We try and use send text messages and things like that, just to say, yeah, we've got you. We have tried to reach out. You weren't available. This is me. This is my number. If you need me, get back in touch. If not, we'll be in touch in due course. It just kind of sets the ownership a bit better. So that's kind of my view. It's a bit anecdotal again, but that's what I've seen, and probably from my personal reflections of where I've seen it, to me as a consumer.
Thanks, Chris. I showed some sort of initial sort of high-level data around consumer perceptions of AI in customer contact, and it showed that perhaps it could be said the risks are more salient than the benefits, which I think is consistent with sort of the general direction of the wider public debate around AI. And my question to the panel is, do you recognize what the survey seems to be telling us about perhaps the higher awareness of risks and benefits? And how do we reassure people that genuinely we're doing it for the right reasons and that the benefits will hopefully eventually outweigh the risks? Dave, maybe I'll ask you to take that one in the first instance. I know you and I talked a lot about AI in when we were setting up this research. I know you've got some views on this, but what's your take on risks and benefits?
So our wonderful media has done a fantastic job of creating, I think, a great fear culture of AI and the rise of the robots, and everyone's jobs are going to be replaced by computers and all of that. I think what I'm seeing very positively in the marketplace of the contact center is actually AI is starting to really build a confidence and a supporting framework for human agents, right? And I think, coming back to the point that Stacey made earlier on, customers want to engage with humans. I think there are certain engagements that are appropriate for AI to maybe simple queries via chatbots, but when we're talking around emotive topics, which are generally the ones where people want to engage with an organization, they're the ones where we have to have the human element. And I always come back to this: AI can't replace EI, and EI being emotional intelligence. And as a contact center consumer community, we breed that emotional intelligence to ensure that our customers engage and feel cared for. And certainly when we have vulnerability and crisis calls, and I'm sure you feel that in insurance as well, Chris, when a customer rings up and says that their house has been flooded or they've crashed the car, the last thing they want to do is engage with a computer. So it's around how AI enhances an experience for a customer, be it creating that seamless journey or evaluating that journey and making sure that the right channel is routed for the engagement. But I always come back to this: we have to always understand that human emotional intelligence and empathy cannot be replaced by computers, and that kind of will I don't think that will go away, despite if there's the extremes where you've got an AI generated agent speaking it still is quite scary that hasn't got any human interface. So yeah, I mean, I could talk for a long time on AI, but I won't.
And there's a really nice follow-up question from Paul, which I'll direct to you, Stacey, if I may. I'm going to try to paraphrase Paul. I hope you don't mind, Paul. I'm going to paraphrase your question because I think back to the discussions we were having in preparation for the paper, and I heard a lot about AI as an agent or an advisor productivity tool to make humans better. There's a lot of use cases in that bucket. There's another sort of bucket which I might describe as AI in the deflection use case. So using conversational AI, for example, in self-service journeys to enhance deflection, to do deflection better, if you like. And my question for you, Stacey, is, does that make sense as a distinction for you? And where do you sit in your business in terms of AI as a human enhancement, productivity enhancement versus AI within sort of the entirely self-serve automation arena?
Yes, there is definitely two distinctions for us. Within our business, it is certainly going to be used more within the helping function. So the helping our agents get better, get more efficient, give them answers to really frequently asked questions. In terms of putting it in self-service, I just don't think we're ready for that yet. I don't think customers are ready for that yet either. I think that what we have to be really careful of is not doing what we did 4 or 5 years ago when everybody needed this extra channel. So our phone lines were all clogged up, emails were all clogged up. So a lot of businesses went out and got this extra channel of live chat. Let's throw in live chat. That then clogged up because we couldn't actually service customers on that in the correct way either. And I think some of that for me is where we've got this perception from a customer view that's not a great channel to use. If we don't really invest time and thought into these generative AI and the conversational AI, customers won't use it. So you almost have a couple of chances with a customer before they actually just switch off and think, I'm never going to use that channel again. So you have to really be very careful about, my view is you have to be really careful about how you use it and when you use it and how open you are with the customer about using it too, so that we all get the best of both worlds. And there isn't this, I feel like we've probably got another 2 years lag of customers not wanting to use self-service journeys because there is a lot of confidence in that. I think we need to rebuild that confidence in self-service, in chatbots, in, let us help you in the really simplistic times where we can just give you an answer versus actually it's quite complex this, but we're going to set you off on this conversational journey.
Really strikes me when you say we've got another couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see in future editions of this research whether perceptions swing back the other way, whether actually the normalization of self-serve begins to come back because our deployments, perhaps AI-powered deployments, are just better. I do agree. I think what we've been seeing and what we're seeing now is the cynicism. I think people have been turned off because they failed a lot. They've had less than optimal self-serve experiences, and it's on us to turn that around now. I've got a question from Claire, which I'll direct to you, Chris. It's quite a sort of a high-level question. Claire asks, what are the most helpful performance metrics that you use to drive forward improvements in your contact center?
Oh, that is a high level question. I think my first view is kind of it really matters what your journey is and what your customer is. What are your customers trying to do? Why are you engaging with them? Why are they engaging with you? What is the outcome that customer wants? And try and think, I need to measure the thing that the customer wants, because yes, we've all got the metrics, averaging whatever time, abandonment times, average time to handle call, right first time, which are all great. And I think they're good measures. And obviously you'd augment that with your consumer research, your root cause analysis and your complaints, your surveys, your consumer panels and things like that. And I think we're definitely on this journey, and I think a lot of organizations are, is really get to the end point and think, what is it that customer wants and why they want it, and how do I best measure that in a clear and transparent way? And it may be you have different metrics for different bits of your processes and different parts of your journey. And I think we've all been in that thing. You've got your contact center dashboard or suite, and you've got all your core metrics. Probably at that level, it's probably too high level, and I think you need to get it down into the one that matters.
Stacey, which metrics and KPIs do you use?
So it is a really broad question. I'd echo probably everything that Chris said. I think it depends what kind of business you are. So I've been in businesses before where it's very efficiency led. It's very, cost driven. It's very, I would class real contact center metrics. And my role in my current business is very much experiential. So actually, what is the experience that the customer gained at the end of that? How did we work backwards? Were they really satisfied? Did they get what they needed, and did they get what they needed in a timely manner? Work back. What are your measures to make that happen? If that's what your mantra is as a customer business.
Thanks, Stacey. Dave, have you seen any sort of KPIs consistently used that, in your opinion, work or don't work?
Well, I think it always used to be kind of first call resolution, and how do you then measure first call resolution? So just making sure that the engagement with your customer is I think someone's mentioned one and done, but making sure that covers everything that your customer needs in that one instance. So repeat calling is probably one of the metrics that we see where we don't want to see. Right, if a customer's got to ring in 3 times to get their issue resolved, then there's something wrong. So first call resolution, and this comes back to the point you're making around, using AI to enhance the agent experience. How do we almost coach an agent real time on a call to make sure that they hit that first call resolution? So there's plenty of technology. I think the technology is advancing to enable that and support that KPI, but that's probably the one that I've seen most of.
Thank you so much. We're almost out of time. I'm just going to very quickly address myself, if I may. A question from Chris, who's asking about methodology. There's a whole page on it in the report, but high level 2000 sample, representative sample, controlled for age, gender, region. So I'm pretty confident it's a good snapshot of the UK population. It's as robust as any political poll. You might have your views on how robust political polling is, but it's at that level of robustness. If you want to read more, it's in the report, which is going live very, very shortly. I wish we had more time. I always say that, but I really wish we do. The AI topic, I think we could go on and on. If you are interested in this topic, the next 2 research launches are going to be specifically on AI. So I've got one on the 27th this month on AI, and then we've got one after the summer also on AI. So although we didn't have that much time to talk about AI today, we're going to be delving into that topic a lot in upcoming research launches. But for now, that's our time over and done. I would encourage everybody, if you found something useful in today's discussion, to please take a look at the report, which is going live. I'd like to thank our panel, Stacey Mayers, Bensons for Beds, Chris Ward, Marcus Studdy, Dave Mason from Odigo. I'd like to thank Odigo for once again sponsoring and making the Voice of Contact Center consumer research possible. And most of all, I'd like to thank all of you, whether you're dialing in live or on the streaming catch up. Thanks for your time. See you in the next one. Take care, everybody.